Hello, Garland Nixon here, and I'm going to have a little chat. Just some things I was thinking about regarding the Trump Musk, the whole Doge thing, and clearing out the federal government of workers stuff. So let's talk. Hello, Garland Nixon here. And I do a lot of videos here, and I really enjoy doing videos. And I do them, things I'm interested in, things that I think people should need to learn or hear or whatever. And what the hell, look at all this craziness I got in the background here. For God's sake, paper all over the place. Maybe that's even better. Whatever. Where's my drone? Somebody get my drone. Anyway, so this is when I'm just chatting with myself. And it's a good thing because I'm looking, there's like 6 people watching. Yeah, people are like, yeah, I don't really cares about that. But I do. So I'm just something I thought about, So what's going on? Donald Trump comes in and he decides I'm going to clean out the federal workforce. I'm going to get rid of hundreds of thousands of workers and go from there. And my first inclination. Well, okay, let's start here. I talked with Dr. Jack Rasmus about this, and he said, well, look, Garland, so we'll go the economy end of it. He said, look, Garland, this is what they did after 2008. They started with the private sector. They got rid of a lot of jobs. Keep in mind, we go back to the 1990s and the 2000s when they offshored jobs, meaning they closed factories in the United States, and they moved these jobs to China, Vietnam, Bangladesh. Many auto worker jobs moved where? Right across the border to Mexico, because the labor was cheaper, because that's what our economic system does. It always looks for cheaper labor. In fact, what's the cheapest labor you can get? Slavery. Slavery was not a cultural or racial phenomenon. Slavery was an economic phenomenon. It's always, years ago, I have a sister who's a CPA, and no matter what you talk about, she always says the same thing. She always says, Garland, it's always about the money. And no matter how much I dig into this stuff, it always comes back to that. It's always about the money. What was slavery about? And this is all, since I'm rambling on here, it'll all come together sooner or later, or it won't, whatever the hell. This one's for me. What was slavery about? Slavery was about money. It was about finances. It was about ensuring that they could get the cheapest possible labor. What are some of the ramifications of slavery? I argue that's why the South is still one of the poorest parts of this country to this day. Right? Why was the South poor for so long? Because they had slave labor. And then after slavery left, what did they do? They had a lot of black folks there. They had an apartheid system. They called it Jim Crow. And so the black folks still paid less. If you had a black mechanic and a white mechanic, you would always pay the black mechanic less than the white mechanic. It was cheaper labor. It worked for the people who owned the factories, the companies, the whatever it was that paid people. It was about the money. Now, did you use race? Sure. You had to use the issue of race because you had a working class white person and a working class black people, and you had to convince them that there was a reason you were paying one more or less than the other. And for them to go along with the system, you needed something, and they look different. So there you go. That's it. Here's an example. Was it all about race? Look at England with the Irish. Oh, well, they're Irish. They're different from us. Yeah, okay, maybe they had red hair and freckles, but they were white people. Oh, wait a minute. They're Irish Catholics, blah, 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 right? People with the big bucks. And what do? They brought Irish people over there to work really, really cheap and almost slave labor. They brought, when they started over here, the indentured servants, which was where that was the foundation of slavery, was the indentured servants. And what were they? A lot of Irish people, poor people from Europe were brought over here to work as, quote, indentured servants. In other words, they could be slaves for a while and they could work their way out of servitude, right? There's a whole story about how the first slave happened. There was some indentured servants that revolted, and they sentenced them. And the black one was sentenced to life in servitude, and thus began slavery. That was his sentence for the crime that he committed. And thus they're like, hey, wait a minute, why don't we just all black folks? Bottom line is this: it's always about the money, right? So we get to where we are now. In the 1990s, 2000, etc., prior to 2008, moving on towards 2008, what did they do? They offshore jobs. People had good paying jobs in factories, this and that, but there was a couple of problems with that. And here's the big problem with that. And this is that goes to the kind of the Make America Great Again thing, going back to, when there were good jobs, right? Let's talk about that a little bit. I'd say it's 1950s, 1960s, there were good jobs. 1940s, there were factory jobs. What happened? You had the Industrial Revolution, and you had these factories with like horrific jobs. I mean, you go work for unthinkable hours. There was child labor, the worst of conditions. They were, one could use this term, sweatshops. Right? They were all a bunch of sweatshops. Something you may not have known. If you listen to me, you might have heard this story before, but I'll tell you regarding slavery when it comes to labor, and we're all getting into this thing, labor. Something when it comes to labor, an interesting phenomenon for the first real attack on capitalism that came from the planters, the Southern slave owners. How'd that happen? Harriet Beecher Stowe wrote a book called Uncle Tom's Cabin, which, let's just say, didn't paint slavery in such a great and valiant light. Okay, and it really sold. It was huge. Well, the slave owners were pissed, so they started an entire genre of books, and they would finance them, and they were a pushback to Uncle Tom's Cabin, and one of them was called The Northern Planter's Bride. What was that about? What they argued was this. They said, look, do we have slaves? Sure. And maybe we don't treat them fair. We are not, we're fallen humans. We're not perfect humans. That's not always fair, but we feed and clothe our slaves. And it's our job to deal with these poor, childlike creatures and take care of them. However, Northerners, look at you. Who are you to talk, right? They launched a realistic, I would say this, the first real solid attack on capitalism, as it were. So what did the slave owners say? They said, well, look at your workers. You got them in these factories. You got the factory sword. You're working them night and day. You're working them in sweat. And they're white. They ain't even black. You're mistreating your slaves, your workers, as slaves. So who are you to talk, right? It was saying, look, rich people in the North who are snuffing up your nose at me. Look how you're treating your workers. And they were right. Anyway, so what happened? Not discounting their slavery, but everybody was right. You're wrong for having slaves. You're wrong for mistreating your workers in the Industrial Revolution, right? But what happens? Along comes unions. And the unions say, hey, we're not going to work unless you give us decent pay and things like that. So they get decent pay, they get shorter work weeks, they get time off, they get vacation, they get overtime, one thing after another. They come together and they push back against the owners of the companies, and they get some decent stuff. So now you've got decent jobs, good benefits, and the owners of the companies have to pay a fairly reasonable salary, which they weren't all that happy about at all. They were not thrilled with that. So what happens? You get the neoliberalism comes in around late 70s with Jimmy Carter, and then Reagan and Clinton really turned it up on steroids. Okay. And what you see is this: how can we justify a system that extracts money from the poor and gives it to the rich? That's everything for the poor. We just completely take, for the rich, and we get everything to the rich. And basically what George H.W. Bush called voodoo economics, or what Ronald Reagan called trickle-down economics. In other words, we give money to the rich and somehow it trickles down. One of those equations. Well, I do this and somehow it gets down to the poor and ever the working class. How? Well, we haven't worked that out, but trust us, we know it's going to happen. That was trickle-down or voodoo economics, right? Trickle-down economics. What was it really? There's another way that I like to put it, right? what they called was supply side economics, right? That was another, it sounded great. We give money to the supply side, the suppliers, the create side that creates things, right? But when you use the word supply side economics, it implies something else. What's the opposite of supply side economics? Demand side economics, right? The demand, the people, we don't take care of the people that provide all the stuff. We take care of the workforce that A, creates the stuff, and B, and here's the big contradiction, that is in fact the market. These are the people that buy the stuff. As we know, the argument of the crisis of overproduction is that the owners of everything, they screw their workers until they get to the point where they can build a car with a great profit, but they've screwed their workers so bad the workers can't afford to buy the car. The parasite kills the host. The workers are also the market. See, that's the flaw in supply side economics as opposed to demand side economics, and that is the working class is also the market. And if you screw over the working class, if you impoverish the working class, you have impoverished the market. Okay? So what happens? We get into neoliberalism. There are a couple of things that are implicit in neoliberalism. Number one, deregulation. What happened in 1981? And this was a thing that should have been seen. And all of this, I'm getting to all of this. I'm building towards the Trump Musk thing. I'm building a foundation, so stay with me. 81, a guy named Chuck Schumer, just say him, two Democrats and a Republican. They put together this bill, and it's called the Savings and Loan Deregulation Bill. And they deregulate savings and loans in 1981. The savings and loans, oh, well, no, we don't need regulations. Let them do whatever they want. That was really the beginning of eliminating the banking regulations, which consummated in Glass-Steagall going away. So the Democrats and the Republicans worked together to get rid of the banking regulations that were put in effect in the 1930s. They were put in effect by FDR to stop what happened in 1929 from happening again, from stopping. Don't allow the bankers to do whatever the hell they want, or they're just going to do whatever the hell they want. We're all going to get screwed. So these banking regulations were put in, and the Democrats and the Republicans and the neoliberals were determined to undo them. So they argued. They started this new neoliberalism. And what was it? Regulations are bad. All regulations are bad. We got to get rid of regulations. We don't need any regulations, right? And it became part of American culture, so much so that you got people running around saying, no regulations, all regulations are bad. We got to get rid of regulations. All. Anytime somebody says all or none, it's an absolutist position. An absolutist. It's like you ever complain to somebody and say, hey, you bumped into me. And instead of actually saying, well, I shouldn't, or I should have, or I'm sorry, or I'm not sorry, they give you an answer like this, what's called an absolutist answer. You hate everything I do. It's an absolutist answer. Nothing I do is right. All you do is complain about everything, everything. These are absolutist positions. Absolutist positions are logically speaking, they're absurd. They don't work. Absolutist positions. Everybody, all, nobody, all regulations are bad, blah, blah, blah. It all depends. The regulation that you can't put lead on children's toys, that's terrible. Get rid of that too, right? And so this was part of it. And so what happened is you had the deregulations in 1981. And what happened in 1987? The savings and loan crisis. Why is that? Because they deregulated savings and loans. One of them was called Silverado. That was owned by Neil Bush, George W. Bush's brother, and George H.W. Bush's son. And what did they do? They just went out and they gave any kind of bad loan they could. They kept all the money, and all of these savings and loans went bust. And at that time, it was $550 billion to bail them out, and the government bailed them out. That was the beginning. That was the opening salvo for neoliberalism. Who would have thought that when they got rid of Glass-Steagall and the rest of those in the late 1990s, that 2008 would have happened? Exactly. We knew what was going to happen. They got rid of the banking regulations in 91 for savings and loans. 97, the savings and loan crisis, they all crashed. What happened in 2000? I think it was 98 or 99 when they got rid of Glass-Steagall. 10 years later in 2008, the whole thing crashed and we bailed them out. Exactly the same thing that happened. We already knew what was going to happen, but we went ahead with it. Why? Because they created a culture, and the culture was for the American people. The propaganda to brainwash the American people was all regulations are bad. So if we really want things to work well, get rid of all regulations, right? Imagine that. Imagine if the National Bank Robbers Association said, what do you need? We need to get rid of these laws against robbing banks. Why? Because then nobody will rob banks. Trust us. We're bank robbers. Who else would you trust, right? The people who would benefit from a Wild West deregulated banking industry paid politicians, bribed politicians, paid lobbyists to get the politicians to eliminate the very banking laws that were put in place by FDR from stopping the 1929 crash. They played them to get rid of them. They got rid of them, and we had the 2008 crash. The difference was in 1929, they couldn't print money like they do now, so they didn't bail them out. 2008, you had the same thing, but they bailed them out. The other part of that, and this is how we start getting to the Elon Musk. Keep in mind something. They had a problem. The problem was labor unions. Labor unions had brought people together and pushed back against the corporations, so that the corporations had to pay people a decent salary, give them benefits and things like that. They didn't want to do it, but they did it. But they were still making money. They were still making a profit. They were still doing okay. But they didn't want to do okay. They wanted all of it. So what did they do? There was even I forgot what a movie, but there was movies made about this where you had people in a factory in Ohio or Michigan, and they had a bunch of people from wherever, Bangladesh, China, you name it, there, and they were teaching these people how to work their tools in their factory for the last 60 to 90 days that they had a job, and then the factory was closing and going over to that country. But they had to teach the people how to take their jobs, and they had no choice because it was closing in 60 to 90 days anyway, and either they got paid those last 60 to 90 days or not, right? So there we go. And someone said Clinton took down Glass-Steagall. Both parties are corrupt. Well, just look. First of all, you got to believe there's two parties. This was neoliberalism. This is what they did. Right? As I said, the opening salvo really to me of neoliberalism was Chuck Schumer in 1981, two Democrats and a Republican that passed the Savings and Loan Deregulation Bill. Two Democrats and a Republican, right? This was a bipartisan. In fact, when Reagan came in and started talking about deregulation, you know who the big supporter of it was? The Brookings Institute, neoliberalism, so-called Democrats, whatever. They supported it. This was bipartisan. Why? Because they got the same donors. Okay. So now they have another problem, huge problem, and that is you got to pay people a decent salary. You close the factories. Because before you had sweatshops, now you have unions. You can't have sweatshops, right? They kind of outlawed the sweatshops. But if you go to friggin' Bangladesh or wherever the hell, Mexico, you don't have to pay these people a decent wage. You don't have a wage. You don't have all of these laws regarding environmental laws where you can't pour methyl horrible into the river and all these other things, right? So what do? You moved them. They just got out of here. There's too many laws and regulations. In other words, I can't pour whatever I want in the river. We've got too many regulations in America. As an example, I have to have a safe workplace. We've got OSHA, the Occupational Safety and Hazard, whatever it is, administration, right? I can't have a terrible workplace where a bunch of women get burned to death in a factory because the people that own the factory locked the doors so the women couldn't go out and take breaks. And when there was a fire, they all burned to death or jumped out the window on fire. Can't do that. Why? Because we've got OSHA laws. So they said, well, these are onerous regulations. My God, we can't lock women in a factory and burn them to death anymore. We can't pour methyl horrible into the river. That ain't going to work for us, right? So what do? We're moving to Bangla, whoever hell country where we can have sweatshops and we don't have to worry about that. And guess what? If a bunch of peasants die, nobody will even know it because we can pay off the local media, or we own the local media, and the truth will never get out about what happened. All of these horrible things that happened in these factories that they were building, which happened in various other countries, there's no way to know about it because they own the media, they own the politicians in those areas. It's over. So now they're paying next to nothing for labor. Okay, and that's going on. 2008 and all comes along. What do? They weed out all of the private sector. They start going through. If you remember in 2008, I remember we would see numbers. in 2008. Numbers like 685,000 people a month are being laid off, 700,000 this month, 800. I think the 2 months before Barack Obama took office, like 850,000 people were laid off each month, right? It was perfect for the people that own these companies. They could get rid of all of these people. They were paying a decent salary. They just millions and 6, 8, 10 million people, millions and millions lost their jobs. In fact, right now, I have a, be honest, here's a perfect example. So I got a 2009 Toyota 4Runner that I'm selling on Facebook Marketplace, right? And I went to sell it, and I was looking, trying to find one, and I'm like, why can't I find it? I can find a 2008. I can find a 2010. I can't find a 2009 anywhere. Why can't I find a 2009 4Runner? I started researching, and guess what I found out? Toyota 4Runner only made 19,000 4Runners in 2009. You know why? Because nobody had money to buy 4Runners, and gas was too high, and nobody had any money, and so they only made a few 4Runners, which means they're extremely rare to find a 2009 4 because the economy had crashed. Okay, so here's my point. All of that, and what we're dealing with is what was created by the ruling elite was an ideology. That's how we got to where we are right now with Musk. We got to an ideology. The ideology is, number one, you must convince the working class that it is in their best interest, that the entire system works better if we do everything in the interest of the ruling elite. Right? Remember terms like this. They're the job creators. They came up with literal propaganda terms for the rich. They weren't rich anymore. Remember, it used to be rich. They're the rich. The ruling elite. There were terms like that. The bourgeoisie. There was all kinds of terms for people who had money or were wealthy or just under those had wealth. And then it became, and you saw it all the time on Fox, the job creators, right? Well, you know you're being had when somebody comes up with that kind of propaganda. Now it was, since they are and think of the implication. People remember that term. Think of the implication of that term, job creators, right? The implication of the term job creators is the working class wouldn't have anything if it weren't for them. Well, we can argue what happens when working class people go on strike or won't work. What happens if there's, in countries where there's a national strike and everybody in the country says we're not going to go to work until we get what we want. They have to give them what we want. Well, what happens if the rich people go on strike? You wouldn't even know it. There ain't enough of them. Right? So what we have now is, over the course of, I'd say, 1980 to 2010, they've created a trail of propaganda. They've created a narrative. And the narrative is the rich, super wealthy, the ruling elite are job creators. We should be thankful to them. Number one. Number two, all regulations are bad. Now, critical thinking, right? What is critical thinking? Well, if any particular regulation is bad, then we should understand why it's bad and get rid of it. But because a regulation is bad doesn't mean that all regulations are bad, right? An absolutist position, all regulation is bad. And the absolute position even goes like this: there are too many regulations. There well may be. I'm not saying there are too many regulations. In fact, there too many regulations. As an example, the county that I live in, they now say you can't use a gas-powered leaf blower. And I'm like, so let me get this straight. I live in a county, we've got Annapolis, right? Major money, right? In Annapolis, Maryland, right? Major money. You go down there and I see 100-foot yachts. I see people going out belching, 150 gallons an hour in their yachts everywhere. Gigantic mansions on the side of the Severn River that looked like the size of Harvard. You know what I mean? The Black and Decker. I remember that the guy that owned Jimmy Dean's or whatever sausage. He was always, there. I mean, I could go on and on and on. The billionaires. Oh, mansions all up and down the side of the Severn River. Wealthy, all of that. So one schmuck. And this isn't the only mansions they have. I used to have a client. His summer home was 1,000 acres. 1,000 acres. That was his summer home, right? So just him and his wife. His kids were grown. So a guy can have a summer home that's 1,000 acres for just two people, right? How much does it cost to heat, electrify? He had a whole big staff of this giant staff of workers that just worked all the time and did all kinds of stuff there, right? Unbelievable. But the size of this estate, his summer home, one of three of his major homes. And here's my point. So what him and his wife can blow all of this pollution or whatever the hell you want into the air, but I can't run a leaf blower. They got a private plane. They got yachts all over the place, and I can't blow a leaf blower. So here's my point. For any particular regulation or set of regulations, a critical thinker can say, we should get rid of specific regulations, and here's why we should get rid of these regulations. And I'm like, great. But to say we should get rid of all regulations are bad is not critical thinking. It is an absolutist position, and I do not believe in absolutist positions. That's how we got here. So now what happens? The 2008, all of those layoffs they were talking about, that was weeding out the private sector. You had a lot of people working in places, offices, bills, you name it, banks, wherever, companies, corporations, you name it, who had good jobs and were making pretty good money. And the banking crisis gave them the opportunity to weed out the private sector, to get rid of all of these good jobs and leave these people working at the local mini mart or something for minimum friggin' wage. Okay, so you've got that. The private sector gets weeded out. So what do you have left? You have the public sector. You have state jobs. You have federal jobs. State and federal jobs still have a reasonable pay. You know what kills me? When people talk about the federal government, man, those people make lots of money. They're overpaid. No, they're not. That's what people should be paid. If you go somewhere, I brought this up. My dad was a longshoreman. My dad had a third grade education. He was a smart guy. He was a hardworking guy. He got up. He used to always, I remember my dad, what do you got? I got to go to bed. Well, I got 6 o'clock orders. What does that mean? That means he had to be at the waterfront at 6 a.m. in the morning. You know what it feels like at the waterfront at 6 a.m. in the morning in January, February, out on the ship, wind sweeping across the water of Baltimore Harbor? Trust me, it ain't a place you want to be. So it wasn't a pleasant place to work by any stretch of the imagination. You got on a hard hat, you're freezing, what have you. But longshoreman made a decent salary. He made a decent salary. I used to say my dad bought a new pickup every about 3 years. He made a decent salary doing that. He had good benefits. We had dental care and stuff like that, right? Why? Even though he didn't have much education, he was in a union, and the union could push back against these companies. It was called Cotman Company. He worked with Cottman. He was in the ILA, and these companies made a fortune, and they could afford to pay the longshoremen a good salary and still make a fortune, but they wouldn't have done it unless they were forced to. But they could, and they had rules and regulations. It was very dangerous. Every now and then, a longshoreman would die on the job. Dangerous work, ice, terrible, cold, big equipment, cranes swinging all over the place. People would get injured, knocked off the 40 feet down the deck of a ship, all broken up. It was bad. It was difficult work. It was hard work. It was back-breaking work, paid a decent salary. Why? Because they could force the people who owned it to pay them a decent salary. Okay, that's the longshoremen now. Right now, they got good salary. Why? Because they still have that. They haven't gotten rid of that yet. But here's my point. Now that they've wiped out in 2008 the private sector's decent jobs, and those people are left working in a mini mart, all that to get here, it's the public sector's turn. Now they're going into federal workers and say, well, we wiped out all the good paying jobs where we had to pay a decent salary to the people in the private sector. And so now the people who own those companies can just make all the money and do whatever they need to do, contract it out to somebody. Most of those jobs, what they do is, let's say they fire 50 people, they bring in a contractor. And the contractor, then they pay the person next to nothing, and the contractor gets a big cut of it for doing the contracts. So now what's happening? Now the federal government is like, hey, we got all of these people paying, making a decent salary. They're not overpaid. They're making what the truth is this. if you look at federal workers, I live in Maryland, there's a lot of federal workers, right? You go to federal workers, right? And what you see is, to be quite frank, what you see is the way a longshoreman would live when I would come up, right? They have a nice middle class home or property or whatever. They have a decent car. Their kids go to school. They can somehow figure a way to get their kids in college. They can buy decent clothes. So you have a man and a woman who work for the federal government. They make enough money to live a nice little middle class house with decent, the way people used to live when they actually would work in factories or stuff like that. Why? Because they're paid about what an American needs to live a decent life, right? They're not overpaid. They're paid what we all should be paid. You're being convinced that federal workers are overpaid because you're so underpaid. And instead, and here's what the ruling elite does. Instead of saying to you, you're kind of getting screwed and you should be making 2-3 times what you're making in order to survive, and you can barely make it and you ain't got a freaking dime in the bank. They say to you, look at those federal workers over there. Look at all that money they're making. Your tax dollars. And it ain't tax dollars. They just, you know what they do? The Federal Reserve just prints some more money. They put some zeros in a machine. Okay, we got plenty. So rather than have you ask the ruling elite, why is it in this system that I'm not making enough to live a decent life? They set the working class against each other, and they say to you, yeah, look at those lazy old federal workers over there making all that money while you're struggling. Huh. You go put up with that? And you go, no, how dare they? I think we should fire them. Yeah, that'll fix them. And the working class people beat the hell out of each other, and we join forces with the ruling elite to screw some other working class people so they can't make a decent salary. Instead of us saying, if that guy's making 80, 90,000 a year and I'm making 30 or 40, instead of bringing him down to the 30 or 40, I should be up to the 90. If that's, let's say, whatever, I'm just using numbers here, right? You're making 30 grand a year. God knows, for $15 an hour, that's about what you make. You're making 30 grand a year, and they convince you that the fairness, see, no, it's not that you should be able to live a decent life. We just want to make things fair, as if those bastards are looking for fair. So then they argue, here's what we're going to look for fairness. Fairness will be, we'll take them down to your level. And I'd be like, well, I got an idea. Fairness would be much better if you take me up to their level, because that's the way it used to be. And they're like, yeah, that ain't happening, pal. We'll screw them, and we just want you to cheer for us when we do, because, hey, let's not forget, regulations are bad. Government's bad. We got 330 million people. And we're supposed to have a government of a couple of dozen people? They're like, we've got 3 million or 2 million government employees. We got 330 million people in this massive country who need stuff. When you call Social Security, you need somebody on the phone. Hey, wait a minute. I literally got a thing from the IRS one time, and it said, oh, you tried to deduct this $3,000, and sorry, pal, you can't deduct it. You owe us $3,000. And I'm like, what the hell are they talking about? I do not. And I did that. And I ended up going to the IRS, and they had a person called the tax advocates that worked for the IRS. I went to them. I presented my info. I said, I don't know what the hell. They said, we'll get back to you. The person got back to me in 3 or 4 months and sent me a letter, said, you're right, you don't know a dime. I kept my letter. 6 months later, I got another letter. How come you haven't paid that $3,000 yet? I called somebody. I set up an appointment. I went to the IRS. Look at this letter right here. It says, I don't know a dime. Sorry. We all screwed up. Boom, it was fixed. Because there was a person there. There was a person there, and I could make an appointment and go meet a person. When they ask me for that extra $3,000, if it's like when old Doge Boy gets finished, I'll be like calling a AI. Hey, they said I just got a letter. It says I owe $300 million. I haven't made that much collectively my whole life and never will, and everybody I know combined. You've reached the Artificial Intelligence Division of the Social Security Division. I'm sorry, but there's no computer available to talk to you at this time. You mean, why the hell's no computer available? What the hell? But if you would like to pay the $300 million that you own, we will send you to an automated service. And you're like, but I don't owe $300 million. Thank you. for offering to pay the $300 million. If you don't, all your bank accounts will be locked up. And I had another time, tried to use my card, all my accounts were locked up. I called the IRS. I went to Annapolis, Maryland, where there was an office, made an appointment the next day. I came in, the guy looked at it and he goes, "Oh, our mistake. Sorry about that. Your name's Garland R. Nixon. We were looking for a R. Garland Nixon or something. Ron Garland Nixon. We got the numbers. Sorry about that." My account's back. Can you imagine if I'd been like on vacation or something? Like, what if I'd been in another country or something? Hey, swipe my card. Sorry, pal, it ain't working. How am I gonna get home? You're not. You're going to be a peasant here, and you're probably going to die picking bananas. No, but there was somebody there. So now I'm convinced that I'm better off if there's nobody there to call. If I talk and I get artificial intelligence, might I add, I have a suspicion here. Let's go with this suspicion. I have a suspicion, because this is the way neoliberalism works out. Let me throw it at you. That these people that are getting fired by the tens of hundreds of thousands, because we're far better off not having somebody to talk to when we call, or to look into our problems in the federal government when we need something. Far better off if we just don't have anybody to do that. They'll save money. They're going to be replaced. You know it and I know it. They're going to replace them with AI. They're going to replace them with AI. And if you'd ever done like digital AI, you understand that it is not really intelligence. It is predictive programming. AI is a propaganda misnomer. It is not intelligence. Artificial intelligence, I'll put it to you like this. Whatever AI, the first one that came out, Chat GPT or whatever, and one of the things that happened was people started saying, hey, look, I go on Chat GPT and I ask, was the United States involved in overthrowing the government of Ukraine? And Chat GPT said, yes. You remember that? Some of you people might remember that. And Chat GPT says, yes, according to this, Victoria Nuland, this happened, the Maidan, blah, blah, blah. And Chat GPT looked for data and information online, and you put that collectively together, and that spelled, yes, the United States was involved in overthrowing the government of Ukraine, right? And everybody was like, see, we got you sons of bitches now. Your own Chat GPT says that. What do you have to say? A couple of days later, Chat GPT didn't say that anymore. We were like, hey, well, can't exactly say for sure. Ukraine, who knows? Putin's bad or something like that. And I'm just an old AI. What do I know? And we're like, hey, Chat GPT is supposed to be independent. In other words, it's bullshit. It's predictive programming, and the key word is programming. AI is programmed to do things, to say or not say, to see or not see things, to evaluate things with a twist or not with a twist. The idea, what we're being told about AI is that it is completely independent programming, that it just uses empirical evidence and data, and it consolidates the data, and it comes up with this bullshit. It's not true. It's just another method of propaganda. And you're a fool if you think that AI is not going to be used as a propaganda tool, because everything's used as a propaganda tool in this country. So here we have it. Now we have the stage set. So now old Doge boy goes in and says, we're going to get rid of X amount of employees. Well, the first unfortunate problem is, when you need some help, you're going to find out. When you need something from the government, and because there's less employees, because it's all automated, you're going to have more errors. All the computer needs to do is move 1 decibel over, and there you go. Hey, here's your check, and you're like, oh great, the government owes me $2,164.17. Instead, it's $21.64. And you're like, well, sorry, the computer moves the decibel over. Now you're $2,180 short, and you're trying to find somebody because you want the right amount of money. Or it gives you a check for $200 million, and you know you can't cash it because they're going to lock you up. But you can't get your real check because there's nobody to call. Right now, you call Social Security, you know what they're going to say? Due to staffing shortages, we won't be able to get to you for X amount of months. If you know anyone You can who's like got their legs cut off or something, lost their eyesight, whatever, and they apply for Social Security disability. Number one, they reject you 2 or 3 times, then you get a hearing, and then they give you the whatever it's with the money back. And that could take a year. How the hell long do you think it's going to take when they lay everybody off at Social Security to say, hey, poor bastard there, he was in an industrial accident and he lost his eyesight. He's got his arms cut off. He got paralyzed from whatever, and he's unable to work. And he needs Social Security in our country. It ain't much, but it's a little something. So he's going to can get Social Security. He can get on Medicaid because he doesn't have any money. So he can get treatment for his loss of sight or legs or whatever it is. And the things that this poor bastard needs to survive because they're unable to take care of themselves anymore. And somebody calls Social Security for him because he can't see. Social Security, they put all the information in, or they go on a computer and they're like, unfortunately, due to staffing shortages, we should be able to get in touch with you in 3 to 5 years. Oh crap! Well, the guy needs Medicaid anyway because he's got to get treatment for whatever interest he has. Great, Medicaid will be right back to you in 3 to 5 years. You'll be dead of old age by the time it happens, which might be the plan, might I add. So they're going to go screw us, and all of the libertarians are going to go, whoa! Bill Clinton was right. And Chuck Schumer was right, and the billionaires were all right, and George H.W. Bush and Ronald Reagan, all of them were right. Regulations are bad. We need to get rid of absolutely every regulation. Number one. Number two, government is bad. We need smaller government. We need to get rid of all these lazy government employees that are sitting around doing nothing. Do you know what they do? No. But I know they do nothing. Why? Because my ideology says they do nothing. I don't really know what they're doing. I have no clue what any given what this person over the Department of Agriculture does. I don't know. But I have an ideology, and my ideology says that all government workers are doing it. I remember I was talking about this one time, and I looked in the chat, and some of the guy says, "Well, they don't do anything anyway." That is not a statement of fact. That is a statement of ideology. They don't do anything anyway. I could just an absolute. I could just say, "Where do you work?" Oh, sure, I work down at Joe's Pizza. You don't do anything. Nobody that works at pizza shops do anything. Are you kidding me? I work hard. It's hot in there. There's dough all over the freaking place and cheese flopping everywhere. Customers coming in and screaming at you. It's terrible. It's horrible. And I could say, no, it's not. It's great. It's an easy place to work and you're overpaid. Why? Because I'm not saying that based on your experience at the pizza shop. My ideology says everybody that works at a pizza shop is lazy and you only need one person because nobody there does anything and they're overpaid. My ideology says that. So guess what? I don't care what your experiences is at the pizza shop because I don't even know what it is because I have an ideology that determines what it is. It's about federal employees. I don't know what they do. Who cares? Nothing. They're all lazy. Why? Because my ideology says that. That is the opposite of critical thinking. That is the opposite of using data and information. Epistemology. How do I know what I know? If somebody asks you, how do you know that? You got to be able to answer it. Well, these government employees are all a bunch of lazy bastards. What do they do? How do you know that? Oh, it's just true. That's where we are. And now old Doge Boy, who's the richest man in the world, I don't know that he really is, but let's just put it this way. He ain't broke, right? Who's filthy, stinking rich. This maggot now is coming down with a bunch of 18-year-old computer geeks going around thinking that somehow they can just go on computers and look around and just say, we got to get rid of all these people. Waste, fraud, and abuse. That's the term, right? Waste, fraud, and abuse. It doesn't even mean anything. If you're saying, see, I believe in proving things. If you say it's waste or fraud or abuse, show me where each individual case is either waste or fraud or abuse. But it's not empirically waste, fraud, or abuse. It's not waste, fraud, or abuse based on data or information. It's waste, fraud, and abuse based on ideological inclinations. I know it's waste, fraud, and abuse. Why? Because that's what we believe. We believe the government's waste, fraud, and abuse. That's the term we use for government workers, waste, fraud, and abuse. How do you know that that person who works in the USDA or whatever the hell doing what they do, how do you know that's waste, fraud, and abuse? That person that works there. See, that's me. No, they are. Yeah, come on, Garland. What do you love government workers or something? There we go. We go to emotion. You love government. I had somebody say that to me. Oh, well, I guess you just love government workers. I said, love them. Like, I want to hug them all and kiss them. Sure, I love them. I love everybody. I love non-government workers. But what the hell does that mean? I literally said that. I said, I oppose to. What do you love government workers? I said, what does that even mean? I didn't even understand that statement. There is no sense to I love or dislove government workers. That is an ideological statement that says I should make my decisions about government workers based on emotions, which tells me if you ask me whether I love government workers, you're exposing that your decisions are made based on your emotions. You hate government workers or love them or like them. I'm saying I want to make my decision based on empirical evidence. And oh, by the way, some poor schmuck out here at some point is going to need to call Social Security. It's going to need to call the Department of whatever and have something done. We don't need that. There's what are those damn things? Gigantic boa constrictors crawling all over South Florida. I used to work with some people at the Department of Fish and Wildlife, and they worked in the invasive species, and they were working on dealing with them. Then we got to get the numbers down and things like that. Now, I thought it was not an unreasonable thing to do for the government to say, holy crap, there's snakes, these friggin' snakes from Southeast Asia swimming all over Florida, strangling the living crap out of every dog, rat, and muskrat they can get their coils around. I think it's a good idea for the Department of Fish and Wildlife to try to at least research and try to figure out something they can do. And they had all these programs to try to get rid of them and hunt. You're familiar with it. I don't think there's nothing wrong with that. But according to old Doge boy, screw them. We don't need that. It's waste, fraud, and abuse. What do we need people go looking for anacondas? Let them squirm around and do whatever the hell they're going to do. I think these things require discussion. And you can't take a guy who happens to be a billionaire, might I add the contradiction. Based on my research, it appears to me that between 2008 and now, he's gotten somewhere north of $20 billion in government contracts. A man who's got billions of dollars of government contracts now with SpaceX and all kinds of other things, right? So here's my question. If he wants to save government money, why doesn't he just close out all of his government contracts? Hey, you know what? Who the hell is going through SpaceX looking for waste, fraud, and abuse? I got a feeling nobody. So his company that has government contracts doesn't have to be checked for waste, fraud, and abuse. They don't have to lay over it off a soul because all this money's going in his filthy, stinking criminal pockets. But some poor schmuck at the Department of Agriculture that works at a desk, feeding their family, making a decent living, they got to go. And might I add, let me add this. Might I add, what happens to this money they save, right? What do you think is going to happen to it? Oh, we're going to save whatever, $1 trillion. I think saving $1 trillion, but they'll make it up. Oh, guess what? We laid off federal workers and we saved $25 billion. Okay. All right. We saved $25 billion this year. And what's happening with the Pentagon? Oh, look, remember Trump said that was going to go down. He was trying to decrease it by 8%. They ain't decreasing it by no percent. It's going up. I will guarantee you this. Whatever amount of money they save by firing working class people will go to the Pentagon. It'll go to SpaceX. But you know, how about this, old Doge boy? We're going to Mars. We're going to Mars. We're going to Mars. Trump, we're going to Mars. I ain't going to Mars. The people that you're laying off ain't going to Mars. They're losing their homes. They're losing their livelihoods, their pension, everything. We're going to Mars. Interesting. And who the hell's paying for us going to Mars? working class people. America, we're paying for Mars. Or they'll just print more money that they could have been paying federal workers with. Nope, not that money's going to Mars. And what the hell are we going to do on Mars? We're going to waste a bunch of money on some vanity project for this idiot to go to Mars. Here's the thing. If the people here are impoverished, hungry, war-torn, threatened with nuclear conflict, don't know what the hell's coming next, what's the point of going to Mars if you can't even get your shit straight on Earth? It's a vanity project for this guy. And might I add, I wonder who's going to get those government contracts to go to Mars? Perhaps SpaceX? And guess who else will get it? Lockheed Martin, General Dynamics, all Honeywell, all of the defense contractors will get the contracts to go to Mars. They probably never even get to Mars. They don't give a shit about Mars. This is a vanity project for old Doge boy to feel good and for these bastards to fill their pockets. And let me tell you another thing. When they lay all of these people off, and as they know, I know, you know, we both know what's going to happen. People are going to start calling and say, I can't get into the government. My God, why does this computer say I owe $50 million in taxes and I only made 50,000 last year? What the hell's going on here? Oh my gosh, they've locked up my bank accounts and taken everything out. The government screwed up. Oh, for God's sake, what's happening here, right? And it ain't going to work. And they already know this. And they'll be like, we've got a plan. We'll know how to fix it. Here's what we're going to do. We're going to replace all of this with artificial intelligence. We had no idea that firing everybody over here at the Social Security and Department of the Interior and the Health Department, this and that. We had no idea that that was going to cause these problems, even though they're lying. They know it. They say, but we've got some artificial intelligence programs that are all ready to do it. You know what? Let me ask you this. Why the hell do you think that Musk and his team need to get into everything? You notice this? They're not just, it'd be one thing if they said, we need to get into employee stuff or this or that. They need to get into everything, no matter how detailed, no matter what it is. When it comes to computer, old Doge boy and his crew need to get into it. Why? Because they're writing AI for that shit. That's why. They're writing AI programs for everything in the government. Eventually, they want to just fire everybody. They want to just fire all government employees and have it all done by AI, right? And who do you think is going to get the AI contracts? I firmly believe the plan is to fire people. Number one, you fire a bunch of, and see, what is that? The arsonist claims to be the fireman, right? Number one, you fire a whole bunch of federal employees knowing that it ain't going to work and people are going to be pissed. So then people are like, hey, why are all the parks closed? I was supposed to be going to this park and you can't get in because there's nobody working here. Hey, why is my Social Security? I just put in for Social Security and I want to retire and it says it's going to take 11 years before they can complete. I'll be dead. I ain't got that kind of time. I'm trying to retire here, right? What? None of my Medicare bills are being paid, and the hospital says they're not going to do anything, and I'm supposed to get surgery next week. What the hell's going on here? I got a broken leg here, and they won't let me in the ambulance because Medicare doesn't pay it. But what's going on here? They already know that happens. That's part of the plan. And when that happens, they then say, "Yeah, we better go to AI to fix all of that." Musk, Bezos, Zuckerberg, etc., say, well, we just happen to have a Microsoft, we just happen to have Chat GPT, BCD, CIA, whatever the hell. They've already gotten into everything. And what do? Boom, we'll have it fixed next week. And click, they turn on Skynet, right? Well, we've got Skynet right here that can handle it. Click. All we got to do is turn this little key, push this little button, put in this little code. Shall I push execute? No how. I won't open the cabin doors. Click. I push execute and Skynet is aware. Yay! Skynet's aware and everything's going to work. Oh, by the way, might I add this? Let's say it cost, I don't know, $50 billion. I'm just going to do $30 billion a year, whatever. Right? To pay, I'm just throwing a number out there, so whatever number, here's a number. Let's say it costs 10 billion a year to pay all of the federal employees that they had fired, and they're all gone now. When the contracts come out for Skynet, for Bezos and Musk and all of those to now run the government with AI, it'll be 10 times more. All this so-called saving of waste, fraud, and abuse, when they get the contracts to run the same things that they fired real people from, real people could do the jobs. They're going to fire the people under the guise of waste, fraud, and abuse. And when they get the AI computer contracts to run all that stuff, it'll be 10 times what it costs for the people to actually have people. I will guarantee you that, because we are going towards, and let me tell you the direction. I believe that somebody mentioned the tariffs. I'll get into that. I believe the direction they're going is they understand. If you think about it, we're living in a society, because what are they talking about? What is one of the things they're talking about? They're talking about going to what is it? A minimum kind of a month, where basically, I forgot there's a term called for it, a minimum salary or something, where bottom line, somebody in the chat can tell me what it is. That is where they just give you money every week. They give you some money every month. Okay, well, you know what? There's no jobs for people. There's no work and there's no nothing. So here's what we're going to give you. We're going to give everybody every month, whatever, 2,000, 3,000. Look, when Doge says, if you think about this, they're already telling you that Doge is going to like this. We're saving money, so we're going to send everybody a check for $5,000. Well, that's gone down to like next to nothing, and only a few people get it. But they're already telling you, we're going to give everybody a check every month. Well, I believe yes, universal basic income, UBI, right? But and think about what that is. That's saying that we live in a society that our economic system can no longer create the kind of jobs and the pays that human beings need to feed their families. Our system doesn't work. No, it's just absolutely don't work. Can't do it. It's an admission that our economic system has completely failed. And the only thing left is to just give people money, which is not going to be real money, which, you know how it is. How do you do a UBI? What do you think, they're going to mail you a check? No. Perhaps you didn't learn what was going on with COVID and the green apps. Remember this during COVID, in a lot of places in Europe and New York, they were so nice. They gave you an app for your phone, and to show that you had done what you were requested to be doing and what you needed to do, so that you could go get on the train or go in a restaurant. You opened your phone and you showed them the app, and they're like, okay, great. Thank you. You've done the right thing, like everybody told you to do. You're safe and effective, and you've got a government app that says you can go in here and get on this train now. You can't do it unless you show me what's on that app, right? Okay. Well, you think they're going to mail out a check? No. You get an app. And the app, the first of every month, it's whatever, let's say 3,000, 4,000, whatever it is, right? And it's just going to be Federal Reserve created decimal points with money. Because to me, some people may not believe it. This is a theory of mine. I'm not saying this is what's going to happen. I'm putting forth a theory, nothing more. You can call it conspiracy theory. It is. It's a theory that they are conspiring to screw us, right? So yeah, I guess it is in a way, technically speaking. But let me keep going. What happens? Every month, here's your app. Let's just say it's $4,000. But if you think about it, created by the Federal Reserve, decimal points. In fact, if you remember, there was a discussion during COVID. During COVID, one of the things they talked about doing, they said, so that people can have money, we can create a bank account for every single person in America in the Federal Reserve. And Congress has nothing to do with it, and they can't stop it. You remember they talked about this during COVID when they were talking about possibly giving people money, which of course they weren't going to do. Number one. And beginning of each month, they can put X amount of dollars in it. And there you go. Now, understand something. It wouldn't be real money when they do it. If it happens, as I suspect, it'll be digital, some kind of a digital currency, some kind of an unreal currency that you can spend, right? It won't be they'll say, what do we need dollars for? Well, all these dollars floating around, they're banned for the environment. They can fall all over the place and a seal could eat them or something. We don't need dollars. Let's go it with the app. So now your app says $4,000, but where's that $4,000 go? You can't own a house because BlackRock has bought up all of the houses. And so now you can only rent. So the first thing you do is you pay your rent. Boink. Right to BlackRock. The money that they supposedly gave you goes right back to them. Oh, got to pay my phone bill. Verizon, AT&T, right back to the oligarchs. What else? Oh, my electric bill, right back to the government, the oligarchs, whoever the hell, right? By the time you get that $4,000, I'm just giving a number, 5,000, whatever it is, $1. By the time you get that $4,000, and as I said, forget the number, it's just a number I'm using for the purposes of this. And you get your digital currency because there's no jobs, because we don't have a society that can create jobs for working class people anymore. By the time you get that, you have paid every dime of it to the oligarchs. They didn't really give you any money. They gave you what appeared to be money. It just very, very briefly hit your app and it slid right out of your app. There's a BlackRock, Verizon, United Cable, boom, boom, boom. Out it went. Your cars, which you ain't gonna be able to afford a car. So now there's some kind of an Uber. Okay, just boom, do that. And hey, I'm catching Uber. Oh, by the way, you're not going to be Uber driving. I don't know if you know, in California, in some places, they already got these taxis running all over the place that don't have any drivers. So sorry, one of the jobs is a driver, truck driver, bus driver, any driver, they're gone. They're all autonomous vehicles. But good news for you, you can catch one anywhere you want. All you got to do is walk up with your app and swipe it, and there you go until you run out of money, digital currency, and then you can't do that anymore. Oh, by the way, there's something else we learned from COVID. There are times when the government may insist that you do something or not do something. So there's shall we say, some strings attached to these apps, in my theory. In my theory, you get this. Now, you don't have to put everything in it, but there's incentives. For instance, you get a little email. Hey, Garland, how would you like to increase your universal income by 2.4%? Wow, 2.4%. Carry the one. I'll get more money. Yes. Well, all you have to do is click this permission and we'll add all your health information. Now, it won't be shared with anyone, blah, 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 blah. It'll be available right in the app. When you go to the doctors, you just hit the button, great. And we'll give you an additional 2.5%, 2.4%. Oh, permission granted. Hey, Garland, another email. Wouldn't you like to share? Fill in the blank. Another 3.1%. Oh my God, my universal basic income is going up. Permission granted. On and on and on and on. Hey, how would you like to give us permission to know where you are at all times and use that to regulate the so-and-so, this and that, and blah, blah, blah. Oh, great. Click. I got another 2.1%. And people will be arguing with each other. Hey, how much did you have? I got a total of 8.7% more in my universal basic income. The only thing I had to do is share all my personal income and give them permission. Now, of course, it ain't all good. Well, the governments, there could possibly be some kind of a flu virus or something. It's flu season, and we don't want people moving around much during flu season because, it could spread. So here's what we're going to do. If you click this, that you will travel no more than 80 miles per week, we'll give you an additional 3.1. If you don't, you'll lose 3.1%. Ooh, what's that you put on your X account? Something about an opposition to some ideology that can be found, located between, say, Lebanon and Syria, and you've put something up on your social media that we find to be, dare I say, anti-Semitic. I'm sorry, but your monthly allotment, UBI, will be locked for 4 days, at which time it will be unlocked. Oh, wait. You won't be able to use it to Uber around in your whatever kind of autonomous vehicles for a week. So you're stranded. You can't go anywhere. Ooh, you won't be able to use it to buy the following items: alcohol, marijuana dispensaries, blah, 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 bowling, movies, blah, blah, blah. You can only use it to go back and forth to whatever, your slave shop. They'll be able to use it. I'm telling you. Okay, here's what I'm saying. I'm not saying that's the way things are or will be, but I have my suspicions. I just put forth a theory. The idea that this multi-hundred billionaire is firing a bunch of working class people and it's going to work out for our best interest. You got to be damn stupid to believe that. You've got to be brainwashed to believe that this guy, who, might I add, I don't know if you saw pictures of him, but he ended up standing next to Benjamin Netanyahu at some friggin' wall. I think they traveled to Auschwitz and stuff like that. The idea that you're not going to, at some point, face getting thrown out of the country, fired from your job, or not being able to Uber around on your app because you said the wrong thing. I'm sorry, you are naive if you don't see that coming. They're getting rid of people. I'll bet you this, even now, people they're getting rid of, they may have a list. When they get rid of federal employees, they may have a list of federal employees. Well, we're getting rid of a bunch of federal employees. However, somebody came over from Unit 8200 with a list and said, were you going to lay these federal employees off? Well, I hadn't thought about these. I'm just saying, maybe they're anti-Semitic. Maybe these federal employees should be at the top of the list being laid off. Yeah, good idea. And how about these? Well, they're always posting anti-war stuff on Twitter. We've been following their phones, and every time you turn around, they're at a protest saying free some poor guy, Mahmoud Khalil or whoever. They're always up to no good. Now, since you're laying people off, I'm just saying, here's a list of people who, they make a lot of noise. Maybe if they didn't have a job, it'd be a little more difficult for them to push back. Wink, wink. I'm not saying you should lay them off or shouldn't lay them off. I'm just saying maybe they wouldn't be so much of a problem if they didn't have a job working for the federal. Come to think of it, they could be a threat to the federal government. Yeah, that's the ticket. They could be terrorists and a threat to the federal government. Perhaps they should be laid off first. You're a fool if you do not believe that that's going on, that some of the people being laid off their names are being given on a list. I will guarantee you those kind of things are happening. So that's the reality of it. Some may call this a conspiracy theory show, but look, there's an old saying: just because you're paranoid doesn't mean that people aren't really out to get you. And just because something is a conspiracy theory, you know where that came from, don't you? That came from the CIA. The term was used to discredit people that didn't believe the official story about the death of JFK, that didn't believe the Warren Commission, that thought it was a scam, on and on. The term was used by the CIA to discredit people who were onto them. And that's the way I feel like. I feel like, it's time for us to start having conversations in which we understand, or at least start to suspect, that these bastards are up to no good. And stop buying into this ideological absurdity that the government, that they're screwing over the working class to make life better for us. That they're going to save money by laying off working class people. Save money. That ain't what they do. The money will be recycled straight to the Pentagon. If they save $30 billion, they will increase Pentagon spending by $60 billion. And here's my question: who would you rather have that money go to? A soccer mom at the Department of Agriculture who's raising her kids, or some Pentagon contractor who's buying a second yacht? Because that's the choice we have. It's not like they're acting in good faith. It's not like look, hey, we got to save this money to look out for the American people. For God's sake, how naive can you be? Might I add this to the libertarians in the House? We're like, well, I don't know, Garland. Regulations really all bad. All of them, even the ones I don't even know what they are. I don't need to have a clue what a regulation is. They're all bad. Like, for instance, the regulations that say they can't paint children's toys in lead. Sure, on the surface, it may seem like a good regulation, but all regulations are bad, so that one has to be bad, right? You know, the idea that Donald Trump came in saying, hey, I'm the peacemaker. I'm here to bring peace, man. Peace around the world and goodwill toward men. Did I mention goodwill towards men? I'm bringing peace and goodwill towards men. 4 weeks later, he bombed Yemen, started an unconstitutional war. Here's a guy who said, I'm getting rid of the warmongers and the neocons. Had a speech. I'm getting rid of the warmongers and the neocons. 8 weeks in, we're going to bomb the crap out of Europe, out of Yemen, and we'll show them. And how long are you going to do it? We'll keep bombing them, and it's as long as it takes. Now, who's that? Does that sound like Biden? We'll bomb them until they stop. Well, they're never going to stop. Oh, by the way, constitutionally, I don't. For the libertarians who don't seem to want to ask this question, constitutionally, weren't you people arguing that you can't start a war without constitutionally running it through Congress? And when you start bombing a country and then you say, I'm going to bomb them in perpetuity, I'll keep bombing them until they stop doing whatever it is. That's effectively saying I've declared war on that country, but I screw Congress. I don't need to go through that. Now, Mr. Peacemaker is like, hey, what about Iran? Might have to start a war there too. I mean, come on, it's been 2.5 months. I've only started one war, for God's sake. I mean, hey, what's a guy to do? I'm running this war, a moderate empire. And you know what? Trump just acts like he didn't say, I'm going to be the peacemaker. He literally said, judge me by the wars that I end and the wars that I don't stop. And 2 months in, he's like, I'm going to start war after war. And we, first of all, dear beloved friends that are libertarians, it's fairly obvious that by now that was a blatant lie with a reckless disregard for the truth. So here's my question. If he's lying about that, don't you think he was lying about everything else? I know. You look, the Obama people wanted to believe that Obama was a great guy. It took them, some of them never really got it, that they were had by Obama. But when he comes in and he brings Tim Geithner and the rest of these Wall Street maggots, it should have been a hint that everything he said on the trail was a lie. And he starts overthrowing country after country. It should have been a hint. Mr. Hope and Change was all a fraud. Well, you've been burned once. This is part two. He's Mr. Hope and Change for the Republicans. He's going to bring peace. He's going to look out for the little guy. Hope and change. Oh, boy. You ain't getting it. You saw it with Obama. Now you got a guy who's like, and lately now, what is he? Higg said, we're preparing for war with China. Oh, geez. I thought you said war with Russia was, remember Trump? We can't go to war with Russia. That'll start World War III. Oh, really? Well, that's a good idea. What do you think we should do? We should go to war with China, for God's sake, because that won't start World War III. You're right. It'll end World War III because we'll all die. That's the game. Thanks a lot, everybody. I will ask you to do this. As I said, I don't know about this. I just did this for me. I was in the mood to talk. I was thinking about this, and I wanted to say, I think you're being had, and this is going down a bad road. But, hey, whatever. If you think this is good, share it on all your social media platforms. If you can afford to, you are inclined to, you got PayPal, Patreon, Buy Me a Coffee, whatever the case may be. BuyMeACoffee.com is always great because it's just like buy Garland a coffee. How much? $5. How many? 3, 5, with 1, whatever. But there it says make it monthly. And just like Patreon, if you can, you can do monthly with Buy Me a Coffee. So that's great. Follow me on Rockfin. Follow me on Telegram. Follow me on Rumble. And share this on all your social media platforms. Thanks a lot. I'm out.